how we live today, how we take care of life today, has a connection to the outcome of what's yet to come.
We are traversing a terrain which we as a species and as a planet overall have not seen before. We are facing an ecological crisis that has the capacity to tremendously alter life on Earth.
Today, we have not only an ecological crisis, we also have a kind of story crisis. That is to say, there's something very wrong about the way that we understand who we are and our relationship with the Earth.
We're at the point in time now where we need to take radical leaps in order to be able to continue to live on this planet. We have to think about it in a much broader, grander fashion.
The question is not, do we need a new story, but do we need a new way of telling a story?
We've got to take into account these values that have sustained societies for millennia and create a planetary civilization for future generations.
Central to that is that the Earth is seen as a living system, a living being, where everything we are and can ever be is dependent upon this great, verdant, fertile, sensitive, intricately interwoven web of life.
The only viable way to live on this earth is to create the conditions that are conducive to life. Anything else we do besides that harms ourselves, because it is ourself.
You are an integral part of a system that is functioning, whether we want to belong or not. We belong to the earth.
We are part of an unfolding evolutionary process that includes all beings and is 100 billion galaxies wide.
So we're going to see just that portion of this beautiful film that Jeff Gitterman is part of. And I want to welcome you, and with the Haas Alumni Association and our host Triana Group and Park Labs technology co-working space here, we welcome you and thank you for coming. I know from the depth of my soul that it is possible to achieve a sustainable world. If we can put a man on the moon, build a civilization on Mars, we can surely create a healthy, thriving world right here on Mother Earth. The moonshot was possible because of breakthrough thinking and strategy, meticulous planning, bold leadership, and a really big budget. And my name is Deborah Stern. My business is 2020 Strategies, and I'm dedicated to financing and achieving a sustainable world. And for the past 30 years, I've been a business development and fundraising consultant to all kinds of enterprises and building the vehicles that allow us to go from aspiration to realization of our goals. And today, in addition to my consulting, I also am building a strategy, advancing a strategy to allow us to bring together many in the investment community to achieve, to really advance and allow us to have a whole be larger than the sum of the parts and achieve the $40 trillion that is predicted as needed to achieve a sustainable world and really allow us to assure to get the job done. So this is our moment of opportunity like no other. And tonight's conversation about ESG investing is one of the really key strategies to allow that to advance this mission. And a very important lever for making that so. So I want to start, even before I introduce our panelists, our wonderful panelists here, in providing some definitions, just so we're all on the same page. So sustainable development is a term that was coined back in the 80s and refers to development that meets the needs of the current generations while protecting the needs of future generations. And it has been really seen as the defining framework for success for our future. ESG, environmental, social, and governance, is a generic term used in capital markets and by investors to evaluate corporate behavior and to determine the future financial performance of companies. And we'll be hearing more about that, of course. But one of the things that we really want to, so ESG, is environmental. It includes from climate to resource depletion, water, waste depletion, deforestation, to the S, social, which is about working conditions, local communities, the impact on local communities, health and safety, employee relations, and diversity. And G, which is governance, which refers from everything from executive pay to bribery and corruption to diversity on boards. And here's the question, how much are we talking about here? ESG is really on the rise in the US and globally, hugely. In fact, many believe that there's just an inevitable momentum here. The US SIF is an organization that is focused on sustainability and investment, and its 2016 study said that $8.72 trillion of ESG investments are in the US alone. That's up 33% from 2014, and that is a 14-fold increase from 1995 when they began tracking this. ESG investments now represent 20% of the total assets under professional management in the US. And as we'll hear in a moment, the demographics suggest this is going to grow tremendously as millennials and women control more and more of the assets. ESG factors are also seen as signaling tools for volatility and risk. A growing number of empirical studies, including in 2015 one that looked at a meta-study of 2,000 research studies around the world, show a positive relationship between ESG factors and corporate financial performance, supporting the premise that ESG can improve financial returns for companies. And let's consider the fact that in 1985, 80% of company stock performance was based on financial metrics, and today 80% of company stock performance is based on brand identity and customer loyalty, all factors that can be measured or reflected through ESG performance and metrics. So this issue has really hit the mainstream. Financial advisors, money managers are in the game, and analytics, which is the focus for this evening, are really vital. So tonight, our focus is on public equities. Public equities are just one piece of the pie of sustainable investments or social impact investments. And specifically, our conversation tonight is going to be about data to decision-making life cycle, the data to decision-making life cycle, how data is used to build this ESG market, and one investor's perspective on this. So I'm pleased to introduce our panel that reflects this approach. Juliette Barré is the Sustainability Principal for Tenaxia North America, a leading sustainability data management solution. Juliet will offer a great view into the front end of this data lifecycle, how companies are collecting, managing, and reporting on their own non-financial data that goes into these ESG factors. Next, Maria Mal is the director of Arabesque. Maria will help us understand the ESG analytics through the lens of her company, an asset manager and breakthrough quantitative solution used to assist investors and advisors to build ESG portfolios. And finally, we're fortunate to have the perspective of Marcy Sims, a longtime business leader who brings her experience as a private investor as well as a former CEO of her family's large private then turned public company. She serves on the board of public companies and is an advisor to many families on the intersection of values, business, and family-owned sustainability. Marcy is also an activist promoting women in leadership and the ERA amendment in particular, and is particularly relevant, these issues are particularly relevant on the G part of this equation. So let's begin. We're going to do 2 rounds of questions to the panel, and then we'll open it up. We're going to leave plenty of time at the end for Q&A and conversation among the group. So Juliet, I would love for you to tell us about Tanaxia, how it works, and how this impacts the way that you're collecting data and what's happening in the field impacts this market.
Sure. Thanks, Deborah, and thank you everyone for coming. Can you hear me well? I mean, I've never had an issue with that. You know that. So Tanaxia is a French tech company. We're a software that helps mid-sized to large global companies to collect data internally, focus on sustainability at large, ESG, and we have them collect this in a smart and efficient way, safe as well, and then to consolidate and report whether internally to the top management or to external stakeholders, clients, rating agencies, shareholders, investors, to anyone they want. We started the company 16 years ago back in France due to a heavy regulation there. There were big needs for companies to report and be really sure the data were accurate. And we moved here, we opened the office a little bit less than 2 years ago now, here in New York. In this, actually, now we are based here in Spark Labs. So what are our roles and how we can help, and what is all links to this event. And let me maybe compare a little bit Europe and the US, that can give you some point. Why do people and why do companies are reporting? Back in France especially, we have a heavy regulation saying that all publicly traded companies have to report on a set of indicators and being audited by a third independent party. Meaning you have EY, Price, or other firms coming and checking what's your data are saying and how you did get those data. And it's even now going to be a little bit of the same kind of regulation from all EU countries by the end of the year. So big pressure from the regulation side for companies to publish and be transparent about it. And it's very, very challenging for them, especially if they are global companies that have sites all around the world, and you're talking about stuff like waste or GHG emission. Climate is a big one, but also social, because you don't talk the same way in France, in the US, and in China, and in India, and in Brazil, or wherever you are in the world. It's very challenging to collect data, and usually people spend a lot of time chasing them, and the end result is not always very accurate. So we come up with a solution for that. Here in the US, a little bit different story. You don't have such a heavy regulation, but talking with people in this space, you realize that more and more companies are doing it voluntary. They don't do the same thing, but they still, I really notice here how people are following standards. You have the very well-known GRI, Global Reporting Initiatives, that I think we did a survey, and around 80% of a sample of 60 global companies were reporting to GRI, but there is others. So at the end of the day, all companies, whether they're in Europe or in the US, they're still reporting on a set of indicators. The big difference is that not coming from the same pressure. Here it's more investors and client base. And while, it's the feeling we have, and while in Europe it's very regulation, the major difference in that is the pressure regarding data quality. With the regulation, and if you are being audited, and if you don't want to have a letter at the end of the report saying that your data are not good by an official third party, you need to really work on that. Here you don't have the same pressure around this, and this is where it gets linked to you people, maybe when you're looking at us on the financial side, ESG data. This is where there's, I think, a lot of room to improve. It's really the data quality on the corporate side. And also getting to know what kind of standards we want corporate side to follow. That's a big pressure as well. We might talk a bit more about this, but on the corporate side, there's a real survey fatigue. And we can help with the software with this, because we can answer and help them respond to any start of kind of standards, but still there's a lot of survey fatigue around here. And I think it's the same way from what I feel and what I heard from your ESG, maybe more financial side, is so many data, you don't necessarily know how to compare one company to another.
Great. So tools like Tanaxia, and Tanaxia's been in this game really as long as almost anyone, are really key for helping companies to manage all this, deliver good data. All right, thank you. Maria, help us understand Arabesque and what you're up to, and how you see the market evolving and your role in that.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Deborah, for inviting us, and thanks everyone for coming. And as Deborah mentioned, we're an asset manager. You mentioned the trends in sustainability and reporting, which I think is also very important, because it's not just happening in Europe, it's happening here too. Almost all of the G20 countries, they now have some mandatory sustainable corporate sustainability disclosures. The EU just came out with, for the whole union, new standards for reporting, which some of it will probably come over here as well. And one big difference, though, I think, for this conversation, which is very important, I don't want to go down too deep, but over the past couple of years, I think we've taken the conversation to a whole other level when we talk about sustainability and materiality, which is really, really important, because sustainability might sound like a catch-all for everything, but the truth is it's actually not. It's very logical that what is important to H&M in their clothes manufacturing process, sustainability issues there, those are not the same issues that are important to a financial services company, and that's called materiality. And if we look at all the data and most of the studies in the past, the studies haven't really distinguished between what's material and what's non-material. And in 2015, George Serafin from Harvard, who's also one of our advisors, he came up with a new study looking at this, where they saw that companies that perform well on material sustainability issues also outperform financially their peers. We're not doing good on these material sustainability issues. But what was even more interesting and important is that while companies that are performing well on material issues, concurrently performing poorly on non-material issues are the ones that are performing the best overall. So it's a very important message to bring into this conversation. It's important for corporations to know what is important, but even more so when we're talking about ESG integration in our investment processes, to really know what's material for different sectors and different branches. So I know that I'm soon out of time, but I wanted to show a little video because Arabesque, as much as we're an asset manager with our funds and our SMAs and other products, we also recently launched an online tool to help put sustainability on the map, to make it easier for investors, corporations, and investment professionals to assess the sustainability of corporations. And it's called S-Ray. It's a play on sustainability and X-Ray. And I just wanted to show a short clip of what we do.
Welcome to S-Ray, the first tool of its kind to allow anyone to monitor the sustainability of thousands of the world's largest companies. Through the use of machine learning and big data, S-Ray systematically combines over 200 ESG metrics with analysis from over 50,000 news sources across 15 languages. Each company's extra financial performance is displayed in 3 ways through S-Ray. GC score, an assessment of each company based on the normative principles of the United Nations Global Compact, human rights, labor rights, the environment and anti-corruption. ESG score, a sector-specific analysis of each company's performance on financially material ESG issues. And preferences filter, a unique search tool that allows anyone to check how companies are compatible with their own personal values. We believe that S-Ray can empower all stakeholders to make better day-to-day decisions for a more sustainable future. Transparent, powerful, and available to all. This is S-Ray.
RC. So, as you mentioned, you bring a wealth of perspectives. And I'd love for you to speak a bit about the why of how you approach these issues as an investor and as a businesswoman, and then perhaps the how you go about this.
I'm going to go back to sharing with you some of the experience as an executive in a family business and then an executive in a public company, and as a director of public companies and private companies. And to my mind, it all really starts with corporate culture. It is an outgrowth of culture to value, if you want to use the word sustainability, but first and foremost, to value your coworker, to value the community that you're operating in. People generally, a company who values their employees will generally find that they value their environment. Morale has to do with cutting corners and being a litter bug. There are some simple, really human characteristics that go back to what makes a company sustainable itself. And those have to do with the participants in the company, all of the stakeholders, whether it's the employee, the community, the customer, feeling a part of the future of the company, wanting the company to be around. We certainly see when you hear about what's going on in Europe, and we had a recent experience just watching what happened, with our president recently, that there's a real, they're much more advanced in recognizing the intertwining of everything that happens in a community and the values of companies within that community. And also understanding that this is a private-public partnership. No matter how sustainable the decisions are in any corporation, if it's isolated within a country that does not have or understands how to encourage and value those things. For example, just recently the electric car that we see here catching on in America. I saw numbers that it's about 500,000 people driving electric cars here in America, and in Europe that would be their penetration is up to much more than that. It'd be equivalent to 7 million people in the United States driving electric cars. Why is that? Because there is a private-public partnership. You get, if you buy an electric car, free parking. You don't have to pay your Easy Pass. You get a tax rebate. There are few things that can happen only if they happen in corporate America. I believe that sustainability has a great deal to do with the makeup of the employees in the company. I think it's not sustainable what's going on in Silicon Valley, a very new industry. It's not sustainable with 20% women working in that sector. Sustainability has to do with your composition of your employees? How are you dealing with, childcare, family leave? Those are all sustainable issues to the culture of a company. I was telling Deborah when we were talking about my background in having been with a company that went public in 1983. I shared with her the fact that we never had plastic bags, that we always used paper bags. And, some customers didn't really understand it. And we just, even back then, said, well, this is just kind of good for the environment because it's biodegradable and da-da-da. So part of the responsibility of sustainability is sharing with your communities that which you know, being an educator. We made it our tagline that an educated consumer is the best customer. I think certainly that is completely applicable to any corporation that wants to be sustainable, that they need to educate all of their stakeholders about what is in it for them, and if it's a matter of being more profitable, or it's a matter of attracting more talent, or it's a matter of getting more growth as opposed to your competitors. We're certainly in an environment today that these words are no longer outliers. They're becoming more mainstream. I still think that most people, and certainly as an investor, looking at companies, don't really understand the meaning. And when we talked about this panel, it was important to put up the definition of sustainability because I think it kind of moves around, depending on what your sector is and where your background is leaning. And we're in a transition period now. Certainly here in the United States, there's a lot that we can do in order for us to make sustainability something that we make our elected officials know the meaning of. We cannot do it without that. I didn't answer your question. But anyway,
that's great.
Yeah.
Do you want to say a little bit about how, as an investor, you approach these issues?
Right. I think, there has been a leaning, I know as an investor who's interested in promoting women entrepreneurs and women-owned businesses, etc. There are more, private equity, venture capital, because basically, women businesses get less than 17% of the money available in private equity and venture. It's even less. I'm interested in that. I'm interested in that because I think that creates a sustainable economy as a whole. If it's looking at it from the lens of an investor on, the Fortune 1000, I think it's a little bit more challenging. Our relationship with the environment as a country and as a species has been to try to mold nature to suit our needs, as opposed to understanding that growth is dependent on us being in harmony with nature, and that one doesn't exclude the other. So most of, if you look at the companies in the Fortune 1000, they tweak around the edges. At least we now have, and it's wonderful to see that there are now some actual metrics that you can apply. And there are more and more ways in which you can ask your financial advisor. Certainly I do. It's pretty easy when it comes to women on boards. That whole thing about the discussion of healthcare and women's health, and there wasn't one woman in the room. Well, that's kind of not so unusual even in corporate America. So it is, as an investor, you can make a difference in the sustainability of a company by being a shareholder and writing in the names of women who could be directors, and then speaking up. None of this happens smoothly, and it's not a straight line. You want to look at disruption in corporate America. Sustainability is a huge disruptor.
Great, thank you. Yeah, one topic that we didn't touch on, but is in this whole arena as well, is shareholder activism and the role of shareholder activism side by side with the investment strategy for making a difference. difference. Juliet, so what, from your perspective, are the barriers and the levers that really can allow for accelerated adoption of the kind of data management capabilities that you have? And do you think that having good data is relevant for ESG? How might that be factored in, even as an ESG criteria? And you already spoke about the relationship between Europe and the US, because I think that's more.
Sure. About good data, of course, you want to say, of course, you want good data. But baby steps. We're getting there. But first of all, you want data. You cannot ask a company to start from no data to the best data, knowing everything, and so on. So, but I think this step is almost, we're getting there really in the US. Just reading some articles in Greenpeace and saying that for the Fortune 500, I think 94% of the Fortune 500 already had a sustainability or some kind of CSR report or ESG report. So we're getting there to have the data. The next step is indeed good data and, to your point, material data. You don't really, it's not that you care, it depends on your values and anything, but if you're service companies with only offices that don't even belong to you, and you talked about your water footprint, that might not be super relevant. But you know it, and you know it's good because you have your bills. So you put it in your reporting, and you say, "Oh, I'm very great with water," and so on. And I have a nice sign in the bathroom saying, "Don't forget to stop the water." Okay, that's good. That's a start, but that's not exactly what we're talking here. But if you talk about, in another case regarding materiality, if you talk about the factories that have a huge water footprint because they need it for processing food or any kind of other products, now you're talking, and then you have to track it. And this is where it can be a bit difficult, going back to the fact that you might have factories all around the world, and not always easy to talk to people, to get the data, to get it in the right units. All this kind of challenges is what people are facing. So regarding the data quality and how important it is, I think if you want to invest, especially some investors are really focused when we're talking about your S-ray, the last layer was your values, what you're interested in. If you're interested in diversity, in women, or in climate change, depending on your value, you want to be sure that's the right data. So in my sense, yes, it's very important. There is several ways to go around. There is an audit that no one likes an audit. But that's really a good way it's a way. There is also putting internal audit, not necessarily a third independent, but companies themselves wanting to be sure what they're saying, and if they have a strong strategy that usually comes from the C-suite or this top management, they will do it. That's really, just going back to this difference, Europe and in here, I'm not here to make the case of Europe, because one thing we see with our clients, not all, luckily, it's because with regulation, it's mandatory, so it's a core to do it, and they will do it just at the minimum, just to pass the price EY exam of data verification. And while I can see here in the US, some don't know what sustainability is about, but those that are going really full force, they're very great, and they do deep analysis, and they are very square in what they're doing. So there's also just convincing, educating, back to education, top management, and not only having a sustainability team to what's the meaning and what you want to track, what kind of data you want to look up, and from there, if you implement a strategy and put money on it, on water, on diversity, you want to be sure your money is well spent. So it's a cycle. It's not one or the other. It's really a curve. And we did a survey of why people were doing reporting last year. People started doing it because the peers were doing it, because some investors or clients were asking for it. But after 5 years, for those who were quite mature and did it for really the tipping point was 4 to 5 years. We asked them, why do you still do reporting to your client? Are still asking like, yeah, but not all, but now we do it because we realize there's a value for it. We call We cut costs on energy, we have better visibility, and then people stop asking us about question. I can understand the name because they say that during the conference. It's Mosaic, which is a huge mining and fertilizing company. When they're starting doing reporting, I think it was 10 to 15 years ago, they had called at the office almost every week about NGOs, civil societies, and locals, because they weren't sure what was going on. Fertilizing is quite a heavy, impactful business, and they really worked on it. There was a lot of stakeholder engagement, of course, involved, but they got, I think, one of the best that I've seen websites about what they're doing, about transparency and so on. And since, I think, the last 2 years, I think it was what the former director of sustainability was saying, they had maybe 1 or 2 calls per year about their locals and NGOs, and a little bit about the financial, not so much. So that wasn't even the financial investors' pressure. That was something that was a need for the business and pressure and the bad publicity. So this is where also I see data quality. You want to be sure, especially because now people are noisy and yeah, we get it. And everything got out there at some point. So you want to be sure you're getting the right data.
Yeah. Great, thank you. This is such a rich topic. Marcy, what do you see as the biggest barriers you experience as an investor in really making some decisions or having the kind of information that you want? And even what have you learned from our discussions thus far that have influenced that?
Well, I think it's a even though it's been for 20 years, it's a very, very new field for measurement. And therefore, as an individual investor, again, it goes back to, how much due diligence do you want to do? There are certainly mutual funds that claim to be more diligent about doing that for you as an investor and looking at sustainability issues. You talked about water. Coca-Cola, for example, is one of the best sustainable water users in the world because that's the number one resource that they need to make sure sticks around and is very, relatively inexpensive to have clean water. So that's if you're looking for something in that area of sustainability. To me, the biggest barrier is simply information. Consistency of information, and it's not just, it's also identifying what is the information that you're looking for. So if it's water, what about water? Because water that's used making clothing at H&M is different than the water quality of something that I'm putting in my body called Coca-Cola. But those are sustainability issues in a resource that really, once gone, is not renewable unless we make desalinization much cheaper. The challenge is information that's comparable, that you can compare. And that's why these tools are so innovative and there's such an opportunity here. But you still have the barrier of knowing what's behind that number, that metric that's being put into the measurement. So I think each investor has to do a little work.
And I'm curious whether you think it would be value from an investor perspective to understand the connection between the investment and the ESG factors of an investment and really the ultimate outcome that we're seeking in terms of sustainability. So right now, even as much data as there is about any particular investment, it doesn't tee up to the larger goals that we're trying to reach collectively, and I'm curious whether you think that's a factor.
I do. I think that's a factor that is as strong as setting culture. There's vision, and what is the company's vision? What is your vision as an investor? You might have very specific ideas about where you want your money to work, and maybe you'll sacrifice a certain amount of return. Maybe it won't be 20% a year because there's a lot more involved in the startup costs or the maintenance costs or whatever it is. But there's such an opportunity now because our economy is really throwing off so many moments in time for entrepreneurs to create their own cultures and to use everything at this moment that we know about sustainability, which is light years beyond what I knew in 1983 and light years beyond what we knew in 1990, you know, when some of these companies got started. And that moment of creation, how you start your company, those expectations, your investors will find you. If you're deliberately executing upon a vision that incorporates sustainability in the DNA of your culture and your company, your product, and your identity as a corporate entity, your investors will find you.
Maria, can you speak to what you see as the opportunities and the barriers for really growing the CSG market? And, you know, it's relative, there's been a lot of movement, you know, very quickly, but where are really the levers for?
I think my fellow panelists, they've already touched on some of the most important things, which is education investors, but also financial advisors and professional investment managers there's still a false notion of that ESG might return concessionary returns, which not necessarily is the case. So there needs to be more education, of course.
Even quite the opposite, right?
Exactly. Today, I mean, the firms like ours and our fellow other asset managers, we use ESG as we integrate it in our investment process for positive returns. So you mentioned standards, reporting standards, not just for reporting, but also for the investment community, so that they can compare apples to apples. Transparency, so chicken and egg. With all the data that we have, we can start pushing out more. The data will provide us with transparency if used in the correct way, but we also need to, like our S-rate tool is built to create transparency around where are our money actually capital allocated towards, how sustainable are these companies. We need easily accessible tools that everyone can understand, and they're out there, and they're also not that expensive. So to my mind, there's no excuse for someone, an investor, to not check, you know, what their portfolios look like and how they can reallocate capital towards more sustainable companies in this day and age. And I think one interesting trend that we're seeing is this wealth transfer that we're witnessing right now from to millennials and to women. We will have more millennial investors in just a couple of years, and both women and millennials have a more bias towards aligning their investment with their other values. 80% of millennials will want to invest sustainably, and 70% of women. And we need to, in the sector, need to make it easier for them to do so. So that's our responsibility as well, because we're in the money business. You have to create trust, and trust comes with showing where the numbers coming from. It's creating standards and transparency. So it's a whole cycle of things that need to come into place. And I think we're on that path. And I was just reading a report that said that next year about 6 billion Internet of Things devices will be out there. And the big data revolution will provide us with, like I mentioned earlier, at Arabesque we use also data that's not self-reporting, and that's a very exciting opportunity, because what you alluded to earlier, corporate shareholder, the value of a corporation is today based on the perceptions of the market, so to speak. So that's going to be an even more important component going forward.
Yeah, great. So, I'd like to give an opportunity if you all have any questions for one another, and otherwise I'm going to open it up to the group as a whole. Okay. All right, so who has a question? Well, this is time for questions and comments and all the rest. Yes?
So, thank you. This is really great. It raises a lot of questions for me and interest. One is, it seems that this environmental, social, and governance metrics are a gauge of risk and maybe opportunity, right? And I think, Maria, you mentioned that there's data that shows a correlation between companies that are actively managing those risks and their superior performance. Is that true?
Correct.
And what's missing is that we as investors don't know that. And that the financial advisors don't know that. So the question is, I mean, knowing how markets behave when that information gets out, it will be used. But I'm just wondering, what does something like robo-advisory and robo-investing imply? Because if it's based on big data and algorithms, and we take out the factor of having to educate humans, what do you see that doing for this field?
Oh, that's a great question with a lot of different questions in that. But to start the robo conversation, I think that's a very interesting trend right now. Robo advisors, and mostly they're putting money towards an index or an ETF, and I think it speaks to that. People today don't want to put a lot of time and effort to actually think about their investments. They want to make it easier. It's making it easier. I let someone in the audience object to the future of the financial advisors, but I think that might change in the future because of the rise of robo-advisors. But then to the point of the quant methods and because those are robo-advisors are based on quant models and big data as well. I think one of the pros with the rules-based investment process is, and the data that you're using is that it's biased and unbiased, I was going to say, and it's in this case more cost efficient for these robo-advisors. But the educational piece, to your point, because you don't interact in a conversation, needs to happen elsewhere then. But it is interesting because we've been approached by a couple of robo-advisors that are looking to cater to millennials mostly because this is their target group and they want to integrate ESG right away and not necessarily calling it ESG, but calling it a good investment, which I hope that one day we don't have to call it ESG or sustainable investing. It's just common sense and good investments.
Jeff, did you want to respond at all to anything? Jeff Gitterman is one of the producers of that film that we saw at the beginning, and Gitterman Advisors is in this arena, and I just wanted to...
You know, I just like to explain it very basically, that if you had a GPS in your car today versus a road map, you use the GPS in your car or road map because the GPS has all this data that wasn't available when you just had this big map that you had unfold. And ESG is your GPS and your data, your SRI and values-based investing. That's the route that you might want to take on your trip. So you might want to avoid toll roads, you might want to go to a scenic route. Everyone has different preferences about the trip, and that's where SRI and values-based investing layers on top. But ESG is the data you want to use no matter what your investment choice is. Impact investing, we kind of say, is the destination on top of all that, because ultimately we all want to make a positive impact with our money, but that gets very specific. But ESG is just basic access to data that wasn't available 10 years ago even, to make smart investment decisions. And about 83% of the metrics used in stock valuation is now intangible. So it used to be the other way around. It used to be only 13% back in 1975 was intangible. But today, Tesla sells for more market cap than Ford and GM and only sells 0.02% of the cars on the road. So there's all this data that's available, and you wouldn't get in the car today and use a roadmap. You shouldn't be making investment decisions without incorporating ESG.
Hi, so I'm coming at this from a slightly different perspective. I work for a startup. We work with social good and impact companies as a single initiative in our company. But the question that I have is that I've heard a lot of really promising metrics, and this isn't necessarily a data question, but I'm hoping that you can offer a data-driven response. I read today a Harvard Business Review article about the fact that Silicon Valley is not investing in sustainability the way that it was several years ago, which is very worrisome to me. and paired in with what's happening in the landscape with like the Paris climate deal and like what the responsibility is going to be on corporations. So I guess I'm wondering like two things. Number one, what does that say about the future? And also number two, what can I do as a small company to try to shift the path toward the right direction?
Can you tell us what the nature of your business?
Oh, sure. We're a company that basically helps. Oh, it's called Founder Therapy. We help startups get from seed to Series A, but we have a whole division dedicated toward social impact startups.
That's huge. I think there has been, along with that Harvard article, there have been other articles and some in more of the consumer press that had, as a matter of fact, I think there was even a piece on 60 Minutes or, I don't know, maybe, anyway, there was also an actual program you could watch. So many of these folks in Silicon Valley are really thinking like the old robber barons, unfortunately, that they are in control of their own destinies. And there's this idea that they're going to colonize Mars or something. And why deal with the mess here and the challenges that we have with food distribution and 1 million people dying in Africa from starvation when we throw away at least as much food as could keep those kids alive. And they don't want to deal with that kind of messy thing. And so I do think that this is short-lived. I think their position is not sustainable as a position, corporately or otherwise. This is just they're living in a kind of heyday. But remind me of the second part of your question.
I mean, what can I do as a small business? It's really challenging. There are no easy answers. I mean, you have to be smarter than your next competitor who might not be as aware and might not be creating a culture that reflects values that you concur with and might not be measuring those things that contribute to the demise of our environment or our communities, or might not be paying people properly, and might not be giving family leave. And you really make a decision. I must say that from a business perspective, as an operator, it was a bit of a competitive disadvantage. I mean, at the time, a lot of our competitors weren't unionized, and we had 4 unions, and a lot of our competitors. You worked until the day before you gave birth, and then if you missed work, you lost the pay during that day. And we never did that. So you make those decisions and run a little faster to get there. But when you get there, you can turn around and look good, look at it and feel good at what you say, because it's a reflection of your values. Thank you.
No easy answer.
Thank you.
And to follow it, it's just a tiny part of the solution, definitely not, but back it up with data and communicate about it. And as you mentioned about the millennials, people really, it's still a lot about money, and like everyone, it is, but they still want to feel maybe re-linked to what they're doing. And so there is also that, especially if we're talking about the startups on the social side or social impact. But also back it up, because what so many millennials are very good at is sniffing greenwashing or social washing. And maybe at first they will buy it, and then they will look it up and realize if it's environment, lots of parabens or weird stuff in their beauty products, or they will learn about, look at Uber. I don't know how many people unsubscribe of Uber just about the scandals for the women with the lady, and then it was a full cycle with all the other things. So back it up, be good and feel your value and do your business, but back it up with data that you feel will be very important to communicate. And you never know, and it depends on the competition, but that'd be really some tiny part that will make very the difference between you and someone that's also doing good but don't have the proof that it's there.
Thank you.
There are questions, comments, dialogue? Yeah.
I have a question about emerging technologies. I guess more specifically for Juliet, with like what you're seeing with your clients
Mhm.
around technologies around wearables, Internet of Things, drones, in terms of gathering all this big data out there for sustainability and environmental reporting. And then also, like what have you seen in terms of working with your clients around using predictive analytics around that data? And like, where are we on this path that everyone keeps talking about?
Good question. And that's, I mean, there's a huge gap actually from one company to another. There's also some sectors, as I mentioned, some will do just the minimum, and others that really believe in it will go full force. Some sectors that got a lot of talking about drones, a lot of attention on sustainability is agriculture, food. And this is strictly almost, they don't care about the environment, just business. Pesticide will cost a lot. And so all the data regarding where like the drone will go around the field and say you need pesticide just on this part, and or water on the other part, and in very water stressful area, it's really make a difference. So regarding this, this is where really regarding technology, what I've seen the most advanced, probably other industries that I don't know so much, but this is where it's the most common, whether in the US or in Europe. Where there starts to, I mean, I will say also the fashion industry is moving a lot about this, but this is completely consumer pushed, and also catastrophes like what happened in Bangladesh and so on. And what did I say? But same thing, Mosaic is doing great things on predictive work. But from one company to another in the same sector, same competitors, that's very from people using Excel and doing their GHD. I mean, there's good thing we can do with Excel, but still it's at its limits, especially when you're global companies and doing patterns and then predictive analysis. From doing Excel to doing the full force and then using big data. For the reporting side, it's really, really early regarding predictive analysis. I think I can count on my hands the number of companies that I know that do that for sustainability, at least really on the reporting corporate side.
Can I just follow that up? Because that's fascinating. So what do you see would have to change in order for there to be more?
Like I go back to your point about education, that people, I mean, there is a mix. There is really people that believe we have to do something about climate change, and they will build a strategy about reducing the GHG emission. But they won't necessarily see, so they will mitigate the risk that you were talking about, but they don't necessarily see the opportunity. And this is a big work on that it can bring you money. You can just not just save costs, but you can actually have a business turnaround for this. Oh yeah, I have a great example, Schneider Electric. Did I say the, yeah, well, you know about it, Schneider Electric. Yeah. That's so huge. It does a lot of things, electrics, metrics company. But basically, back in World War II, I think, they were creating weapons there and chemicals, basically. At the end of the war, they were like, well, maybe there is another war, but I think the CEO decided that they need to switch business, and they really saw a big opportunity with the energy and metrics, and they had this huge engineering and tech capabilities, and they completely switched it. And now, for example, they are one of the companies that use predictive analysis, I think, for lots of things, including sustainability. I think they are Europeans, but I've seen publicity about them in the US, so I'm sure they're around here. But yeah, I think it's really about opportunity and just not mitigating the risk. I think more and more C-suite really see that about the risk, but not yet the opportunities or just a nice opportunity, like a real business opportunity. It's a business case, as you were saying, both for the financial, but also for a corporation. And maybe we don't have enough of story like this that rebounds, for example. There is some, and there is companies like Campbell Soup. I mean, they're really doing a lot. Campbell Soup on food. They have a full website where you can know everything which is in their can, that you're buying, and they're completely transparent, and they do a lot of stakeholder customer engagement on this dedicated website, and they really, I think they really help them in their business compared to the competition, for example. But it's still a couple of names, and I think we need more for that. In big data, for many outside sustainability, it's still a big word that tech people understand, kind of, but non-tech or that data geek people don't really understand. And that's not just for sustainability, it's just in general. So lots of education also on that it's not just a big word for geeky people. It can actually be really used and valuable. That's also, it's just not one answer, it's not only about sustainability.
Are there other questions or comments? Yeah, please.
I was wondering, in Europe, do you have a specific agency for sustainability? And if you look in Japan or South Korea, I come from the medical device world, so there's specific agencies which regulate.
There is the EU Commission for Environment. I'm not sure, but I don't think there is a specific for sustainability for at the EU level. I think it goes down to the environmental agency, and there's a couple of agencies, I guess, that are under the. I'm not sure there's one just for sustainability.
Yeah, but for this new mandate that's coming out now, that's decoupled from the environmental part. So it's how you report, basically, which I think is a great leap forward. Instead of just calling it something environmental, it's a part of a reporting standard. So it takes its focus away from being something just that environmentalists should care about. And like you mentioned before, it's done by traditional accountants, etc. So to become integrated. Right?
Yeah. So the push for that kind of integrated reporting, financial and non-financial, is being mandated essentially in the EU in a way that obviously for multinationals is going to affect everyone. But in the U.S., one of the things we haven't mentioned, I feel like just out of responsibility need to mention, is something called the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, which is SASB, and that is not just a U.S. initiative. It's relevant to any public companies, but it is being initiated here in the U.S. And the focus is really about creating those standards that are related to the materiality of the particular industry. And the intent is to create a standard set of standards for reporting industry by industry, and that the SEC would require reporting on these in the 10K. So that's the intent, that's the goal. In the meantime, they've developed volumes they've created these standards, and I know, for example, Tenoxia has that as one of the reporting frameworks that companies can report to. I know it's relevant to any ESG reporting, and it's something Michael Bloomberg got behind, so it's like getting real momentum. Any other questions? If not, we can wrap it up here and have conversation individually. But I just want to thank you all for coming. It's a great conversation. I hope you'll keep where we'll do. This is a series that we've created on business and social impact here in the New York Haas Alumni Association, and look forward to doing quite a number more, but certainly look forward to one in the fall. We're starting to broadcast them, or at least make them available on the Haas digital platform, so that more people can avail themselves. And I just say onward, and in the spirit of Haas, and for those of you who are Haas alum, there are 4 principles that are kind of the driving force, and I feel like this series underscores that. To question the status quo, be confident without attitude, be students always, and think and act beyond yourself. So in that spirit, onward, go Bears.